Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Mess. Here, in a continuing series of the MiSTer FPGA D10 Nano project, and I was not expecting to make a Sega Saturn video today because we just got a core update 3 days ago. But as of 6 o'clock this morning, and it's only 10 a.m. in Chicago, SRG 320 updated the core again with some big fixes that basically improve almost absolutely everything about this core. All those games that weren't working before or people with different RAM modules that were having issues should see a lot more success with this core. It is a huge update. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor down below, hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. But when I say this core is improved, I 100% mean it, and I popped on my 2.5 version RAM module here to test one of the earlier RAMs. That's because a lot of people are having problems with that module, so if you have 2.5 or later and you don't have any errors on memory test, you should be getting these results. Because I've got a 2.5, a 2.9, and a 3.0, I went back old school. And right off the top, Sky Target here is now working on the core. This game never used to load up whatsoever. It would 100% of the time freeze in the title screen. Now it just 100% plays on the current Sega Saturn core as of about 4 hours ago. Now I did notice that when the stage 2 boss loads in, the Redbook audio does drop out, but otherwise this game is just working. I need to check my original copy to see about the frame rates because this does slow down in core, but I know it didn't run perfectly on Saturn. Honestly, my experience with this game is on Model 2 arcade hardware. But this is a brand new game, one of the best in my opinion on Sega Saturn, and it now works on the core where it never used to work before. And if you've never played Sky Target, definitely check it out. It's an absolute blast of a game. It's basically like Planet Harriers that would come on the Sega Hikaru, except much earlier and with a fighter jet. It's just one of those arcade classics that I don't think gets enough mention, and seeing it running on Sega Saturn here in the core is awesome because, like I said, every single time a new core came out, I would test this game because I really do enjoy it, and I never once had any success getting it to boot. That 100% changes today, and don't forget, if you want this core, you just need to go over to the MiSTer Discourse and grab it from the Unstable Nightlies. There's dual RAM and single RAM. This is a 2.5 single RAM test. If you want to see anything different, let me know in the comments down below, and I will probably check in the future. And if you have any game requests with the new core, leave them down there as well. What I do love in this game, in the boss cutscenes, you can attack with your homing missile if you get in just the right position. Seems more like a bug and not a feature, but I've always thought that is funny. But right here is where the Redbook audio dropped out. You can still play this game. I haven't finished yet, but I assume you probably can. But it is another game added to the working list with this current core, and so many games had problems before are just back. Now moving on to the House of the Dead, this game did used to work before, but it had absolutely no audio whatsoever. You had to play this game mute. Now the new core improvements bring audio to so many games that didn't have audio before, and trust me, I'm going to give you a sample soon. But the House of the Dead has full audio now, both sound effects and soundtrack. And the House of the Dead is one of the best soundtracks Sega's ever done in my opinion, so getting this working is absolutely spectacular and I love it. Again, another game where the Model 2 arcade original was better than the Sega Saturn version, but this was the first version I ever owned and I still have it in my collection. You will see little graphical glitches here and there on some objects in the background. It seems like the sprite is duplicating and flashing around, but otherwise this game is working and the sound is great. There's a few spots in which enemies load in where you may see a little bit of slowdown. I'm sure that will be improved in future cores, but even still, having this game go from not having any sound whatsoever to having full sound is such a big improvement. This has got a great soundtrack, and honestly the games that didn't have any audio were fun to test from a visual standpoint, but listening to them with nothing going on in the background was never my favorite thing in the world. So having this here today is such a vast improvement. I can't wait to see your comments come in about what games start working for you on all of your different RAM revisions. So when you test this, leave me a comment down below and tell me what RAM you're using, and just tell me beforehand as well. I would be curious to see who's using what, because we do kind of keep track of the different RAM revisions and who's having successes and failures. But this is just such an incredible game. The soundtrack is so good, and now it is just working. So go ahead and listen for 45 seconds. I'll come back and show you a bunch more Sega Saturn games that just started to work or have big improvements. And there was a tiny bit of that slowdown when the two scissor men jumped down. It did lag the core ever so slightly, but I'm sure we'll see improvements. And obviously with the soundtrack, you do have to listen to a lot of gunshot sound effects. That's just part of the House of the Dead, but they sound accurate here. It's so much fun to see this game come alive with the audio, and I can't wait to see what the next core brings, to see if we do get a little bit of that slowdown fixed. Now moving on to a game everyone always requests and I always try to check out is Radiant Silvergun. This is 100% working for me this morning. The controls are good, the visuals are there, the audio is there as well, but I do get a couple pops and cracks here and there, so this isn't going to be an audio sample because it does have a propensity to clip out the stereo channels and I don't want to make you listen to that, especially on headphones. But as far as the gameplay is concerned, this is Radiant Silvergun. It is an awesome game and it is just working here on the core, and I'll show you a full boss battle in just a little bit so you can better understand the responsiveness of the controls, because on a shmup like this, if your controls are not responsive, if there's any lag, you are just going to continually take death after death because the bullet patterns do get quite complex. That's not to say if you've never played before that you might not die a bunch anyway. This is a very hard game, but it's one of the best shmups ever made, and it is an amazing Sega Saturn game, and trust me, if you want an original copy, you better bring your wallet. So playing it here on MiSTer FPGA is just an absolute ton of fun. And as we navigate around, you see all of the 2D aspects, the pseudo transparencies in that fog layer there, all of these things coming in. It is pushing around so many sprites and 2D elements at once, and it seems to be running really well here. And don't forget, shmups slow down all the time, so if you see some slowdown, chances are that's just inherent in the game design itself. Even modern shmups today that have no need to slow down will do that. And as we go into this boss fight, it's not the hardest in the game by far, but if there was any lag in the controls, you would 100% be able to tell, and you would have a bad time here. So just watch me navigating around all the different bullet patterns, everything going on screen at once. You don't have the biggest hitbox in Radiant Silvergun, but it is there, and if you take a hit, you're just going to see my ship explode. So as far as the current core is concerned, outside of that little bit of audio popping and clacking, it does just seem to be 100% perfect. I can get through the whole boss, defeat him, not take a death, and that's all you need when it comes to a core and controls. Visuals A+ as well. Radiant Silvergun just 100% working as of this morning on every RAM variant I tested. And just so you know, all of the tests in this video are done on single RAM. I know most people do not have dual RAM, but I'll be talking about that in a build guide shortly. But Daytona USA on the previous core, a lot of people just would load it up and get a white screen. On this new core, less than 3 days later, it's 100% working. The audio is great, the gameplay is there, it is just 100%. Now a lot of the games in this video were on Model 2 as well, and the Daytona USA port was never the most amazing thing on the Sega Saturn, but this is how most people played it, and this is what they remember. So getting right into a race, it's working, the controls are great, the graphics are as good as Sega Saturn could do in this generation, but getting the audio in this game with perfect playback is just so important because this is such an iconic soundtrack. It may be some of the best stuff Sega ever did in the racing genre, and if you know me in the channel, you know I've loved Sega arcade racers more than any other genre outside of light gun games. It's just what I love in the arcades. But I'm going to go ahead and give you a sound sample here, because last time I showed Daytona USA, I told you it was too poppy and clicky, and it was really something I didn't want to share because it wasn't the greatest experience. Now it is perfect, and I'm sorry in advance, the song is going to be stuck in your head all day long.
And they're underway. You can take it. You can take it. Time extended. Right. Your time has been extended. Try to go easy on the car.
Sounds great, and I apologize in advance, but you're going to be singing Daytona all day long and maybe all week long. This is a spectacular game, but Sega made one mistake. They made a song so good that it worms its way so deep into your brain, you're not going to forget it for the rest of your life. If one day I can't sing the Daytona song to myself, that means my brain has turned to mush. All jokes aside, this is just working, and like I said, so many people were having issues with Daytona USA just going to a white screen. I can tell you in all of my testing, it just 100% worked this morning, and it should work for you as well. Now moving on to another iconic Sega arcade racing game ported to Sega Saturn, much better this time, is Sega Rally. In the last core, a lot of people reported to me in comments and on Discord that they were just getting a white screen and no loading. On the current core, as of 4 hours ago, it's just 100% working. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I'm doing this on a single 128 megabyte RAM stick, but I was chatting with Andy D in the background that helps with some of my captures, and he also had success booting this game on dual 128 megabyte RAM as well. So it seems like no matter what setup you have, you're going to be playing Sega Rally, and that is a damn good thing, because again, it's such an iconic game. This is probably the best port from Model 2 to the Sega Saturn that Sega ever made. House of the Dead is good, but graphically so inferior. Daytona USA is the same. But somehow Sega absolutely knocked a home run out of the park when they converted Sega Rally over to the Sega Saturn. It is, in my opinion, their finest arcade conversion work. And just running around the track here, all the controls are good. This is the Sega Rally you know, love, and expect. There might be a little bit of weirdness and some of the dirt kicking up, but it's been a couple months since I played this on original hardware, so I would really have to go back and pixel peep to tell. But if we're at the stage where we need to pixel peep to see if something is correct or incorrect, that means we're doing a really good job as far as the core is concerned. And as always, the most important thing when a core update comes out is we know sRG 320 is good, and honestly that should be all that matters to any of us. But Sega Rally, again, just an iconic game, and it's so much fun to see it running here on Saturn. Now, I do have a modded Saturn region-free with RGB out the back, so I can play any game I want in really good quality, but it does take an upscaler, and that's always cumbersome in my setup on my 4K TV in my living room. So I am so excited to have an improved Saturn core here if I just want to play Sega Rally while sitting on my couch. I don't need to drag out my Saturn, my scaler, everything like that. I can just 100% start playing as of this morning. But if you do test this, let me know down below if it works for you. I know this is still organic and there might be some games that I say are going to work that just don't work on your setup, so if they don't, leave me your specs down below. And I wanted to check Symphony of the Night out as well, because on the last core this had a slight regression that I didn't show because it didn't really seem that important, where there was some weird pixelation at the top of the screen. Within 72 hours, that's 100% been fixed, and Symphony of the Night on Sega Saturn has gone back into the perfectly playable category in my opinion. And I know it's a controversial statement, but I prefer the Saturn version over the PlayStation 1 version all day long because of Maria mode. But again, iconic soundtrack, and so good on the current MiSTer core. Listen for 35 seconds, and I'll be right back. I've played Symphony of the Night probably 20 times in my life, both alone and with friends as co-op, kind of switching the controller back and forth, so I've heard that soundtrack a ton, and to my ears it sounds perfect, but if you have a differing opinion, tell me down below. But again, this was a game that saw some regressions in the last core, and now is back into that 100% awesome category. And if there's some strange way that you have never played this game before, I highly doubt anyone who watches my channel hasn't, do it. Just play it, do it for me, do it for yourself. Just do it on the Saturn core, you can save, see how far you get. This is top 10 games of all time in my opinion. Now moving on to my favorite Sega Saturn game of all time, Saturn Bomberman. I always check this game when a new core comes out because it's the game that I probably played the most with game nights with friends here, or my wife and I will play it together. We played it through a couple different times. If there's anything wrong with Saturn Bomberman, I'm 100% instantaneously going to know what's up with it. The FMV is smooth, all the audio is great, everything leading up to getting in the game is working exactly as you would expect, and I love the cutscenes. You can tell the developers put so much work into getting this right. And the great part is, once you actually get into the game itself proper, Bomberman is just perfect here. I see no graphical glitches whatsoever, there's no issues with the audio, with the controls, everything is just 100% what I would expect it to be out of Saturn Bomberman, and that means that this core is definitely improving. Last time I listened to the Saturn Bomberman audio in like a test a month or so ago, there was some cracks and a little bit of static in the audio playback. That has 100% been fixed recently, and this is a game that I know you can finish on the Sega Saturn core because I have done it once in the background just to have some fun. But I can't tell you how good the soundtrack is of Saturn Bomberman, and I can't tell you how good the playback quality is if I don't give you a sound sample, so you're getting one more of this video, and trust me, this soundtrack, straight 10 out of 10, I love it and you should too. But enjoy. Iconic soundtrack, and it just sounds perfect here. So if you want to play Saturn Bomberman today on the current core, I 100% recommend you do so. It plays perfectly, it sounds perfect, and 100% it is just a perfect game in my opinion. But those are the tests as of this morning for the current Sega Saturn core, which just came out about 4 hours ago. This is probably my quickest turnaround video in MiSTer history, but I've been enjoying keeping up, and you guys seem to enjoy watching. And like I said earlier, if you have any requests for the next testing video, leave them down below, and I'll make sure we get to each and every one of them. It might not be in the next video, but I definitely try not to forget about any of you. But Sega Saturn had a massive improvement this morning, the biggest jump I think in the core's history, so you should definitely go play it today. I'm sure that I'll have videos throughout the week, but like and subscribe, all that jazz, and I'm going to go back to my normal day. Bye bye.